she was invisible. To her ex-husband, Elena Hayes was just a ghost in a beige cardigan, a relic of a life he'd upgraded from. He stood in the sterile luxury of the private airport lounge, laughing at her. He mocked her failure, her quiet existence. He had the new wife, the new company, the new life. Elena had a cup of complimentary coffee. But in 10 minutes, the whine of a $70 million engine would change everything. The laughter would die in his throat, and he would finally learn who she really was. The lounge at the Teterboro Executive FBO hummed with a quiet, expensive energy. It was a sound Elena Hayes had never gotten used to, the sound of lives lived at a different altitude. The scent of dark roast coffee and polished mahogany hung in the air, a stark contrast to the small, one-bedroom apartment she'd called home for the past 18 months. She sat in a plush leather armchair, her back rigid, tracing the rim of a porcelain cup with a nervous finger. Her oatmeal-coloured cardigan felt like a burlap sack in a room draped in cashmere and bespoke suits. Today was the day, the culmination of 674 days of relentless, silent, soul-crushing work. The day her new life either began or shattered completely. She was nervous, so nervous that the complimentary biscotti on her saucer remained untouched. Her stomach was a knot of anxiety, and a flicker of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. She was waiting for a flight. Not a commercial one, not even a first-class seat. She was waiting for a GX, or so the email had said. The very idea was so absurd that she kept checking the printed confirmation in her simple tote bag, half expecting a security guard to tap her on the shoulder and point her toward the main terminal, where she belonged. Her divorce from Richard Davenport had been a masterclass in public humiliation. He hadn't just left her, he had systematically erased her. They had been college sweethearts, the classic pairing. He, the charismatic business major, and she, the brilliant, introverted computer scientist. Together, they founded Helios AI, a company built entirely on the back of her revolutionary machine learning algorithm. Elena had been the architect, the engineer, the very soul of the company. Richard had been the face. He charmed investors, gave TED Talks on her work, and graced the covers of business magazines. Then came Chloe. Chloe was a decade younger, a social media influencer whose entire contribution to society seemed to be posting pictures of expensive things. Richard, in the throes of a spectacular midlife crisis, decided Chloe was the upgrade he deserved. The divorce was brutal. Richard's legal team, funded by the company she had built, painted her as a bitter, unsupportive, and replaceable cog in the machine. They argued that her algorithm, while clever, was just a piece of the puzzle. The real value, they claimed, was in Richard's vision and brand building. In the end, he kept the company, the house in the Hamptons, the art collection, and the network. Elena was left with a modest cash settlement and a single obscure patent she had filed under her own name years before, an experimental offshoot of her main algorithm that Richard's lawyers had deemed academically interesting but commercially worthless. They had let her keep it out of pity, a scrap from the table. She'd spent the last of her settlement money just to survive and pour the rest into a rented server and endless nights of coding. That worthless patent, it turned out, was not worthless at all. It was the key. While Richard was busy running Helios AI into the ground with flashy, unfocused projects, Eleanor had been in her tiny apartment, nurturing that single patent into something revolutionary. She'd built a new company from the ashes, Phoenix Systems, a name she'd chosen on a night fueled by desperation and black coffee. For 6 months, she had been in top-secret negotiations with Astra Dynamics, a global technology conglomerate run by the elusive and legendary Julian Thorne. They hadn't just been interested, they had been stunned. Her new platform could solve a problem in global logistics that had baffled the industry for a decade. The deal was staggering, a life-altering acquisition that would make her one of the most influential figures in tech. Today, Astra Dynamics was flying her to their headquarters in Geneva to sign the final papers. The jitters in her stomach were real. This was it. She checked her simple Timex watch, a practical gift from her late father, and took a small sip of lukewarm water. She just had to wait. She just had to get on that plane. She closed her eyes for a brief second, trying to center herself, trying to silence the ghosts of Richard's voice in her head. The voice that still whispered she was nothing without him. And that, naturally, was when she heard his. Well, 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 look what the cat dragged in. Elena's eyes snapped open, her blood ran cold. Standing not 10 feet away, flanked by gleaming Rimowa luggage, was Richard Davenport. He looked exactly as he always had, offensively handsome, wearing a tailored Italian suit that probably cost more than her apartment's security deposit, and radiating an aura of smug, unearned superiority. His hair was perfectly coiffed, his smile a bright, predatory slash, and clinging to his arm, looking like a high-fashion flamingo, was Chloe. She was draped in a pink Balenciaga tracksuit, her lips inflated to comical proportions, and her eyes, wide and vacant, scanned the room with a look of profound boredom. Elena's first instinct was to shrink, to disappear into the beige upholstery of the chair. She felt a hot flush of shame creep up her neck. Of all the places, of all the times. Richard sauntered over, Chloe trailing behind him like an expensive accessory. He stopped directly in front of her chair, forcing her to look up at him. "Elena," he said, drawing the name out, his voice dripping with condescending amusement. "I have to say I'm shocked. This is the invitation-only lounge. Did you get lost on your way to the food court?" Chloe let out a high-pitched titter. "Ricky, don't be mean. Maybe she's cleaning in here now. It's good, honest work." Eleanor's hands clenched in her lap. She refused to give them the satisfaction of a response. She simply stared at him, her expression neutral, though inside her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Still silent," Richard scoffed, shaking his head as if she were a lost cause. "Always the quiet little mouse, weren't you? Look at you, Elena. Same drab clothes. Life not treating you well after me?" He leaned in, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, though it was still loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "Still living in that sad little apartment in Jersey? I saw the pictures. Very cozy." He was baiting her. He had always been a bully, someone who could only feel big by making others feel small, and she had always been his favorite target. "We," he said, gesturing dramatically to himself and Chloe, "are on our way to Aspen. A little thank you from our investors. Helios is landing a massive new round of funding. We're about to go stratospheric. You probably read about it." Elena hadn't. The only news she followed was the quiet collapse of Helios's stock price. Public records showed the company was hemorrhaging cash, burning through the goodwill she had built and failing to innovate. Richard was a salesman, not a builder, and he had sold a lemon. She knew, from her contacts, that he was desperately scrambling for funding, not celebrating it. He was lying. As always. "What about you?" he pressed, enjoying his performance. "What brings you to Titterboro? Meeting a new guy? Did you finally land one? Let me guess. Is he a regional sales manager? A dentist?" He laughed, a loud, braying sound that made a nearby woman in a Chanel suit look up in annoyance. "Seriously, Elena," he said, the fake pity in his voice making her skin crawl. "What are you even doing here? You look completely out of place. Are you waiting for an Uber? This is the wrong building for that, sweetheart." He and Chloe laughed together. It was the sound that had haunted her nightmares, the sound of their shared betrayal. Elena looked down at her hands, at the chipped nail polish on her right index finger from a late-night coding session. She took a deep, steadying breath. She had come too far to let him break her. Not here. Not today. She looked up, meeting his gaze evenly. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but clear as a bell. "I'm waiting for a flight, Richard." Richard's eyebrows shot up. "A flight? On what? A propeller plane to Poughkeepsie? You can't even afford a first-class ticket on United anymore, let alone a seat out of Teterboro." "Ricky!" Chloe whined, pulling on his arm. "Stop talking to her. You're getting her little sad sack germs on your suit. Let's go get some champagne." "In a minute, baby," Richard said, patting her hand, his eyes still locked on Eleanor. He couldn't stand that she wasn't crumbling. "I'm just fascinated. This is like watching a nature documentary. The discarded mate trying to return to the watering hole." Elena stood up. She was 5'5", and Richard towered over her. But by standing, she reclaimed some small piece of her dignity. She picked up her simple tote bag, her knuckles white. "You should go, Richard. Your champagne is waiting." "Oh, so feisty now," he sneered. "Where was this backbone when we were married? Oh, wait, I remember. You didn't have one. You were just the code monkey in the basement. I built that company, Elena. I built it. And you? You're just a footnote." "A footnote," Elena repeated, the words tasting like ash. "That's right. And now, if you'll excuse us," he said, taking Chloe's arm again. "We have to prepare for our flight. Our ride's a beauty, a citation latitude, brand new." He began to steer Chloe away, but paused, looking back over his shoulder as a final parting shot. "It's a shame, really. You had so much potential, but you needed me to make any of it matter. And now look at you." He gestured around the luxurious lounge again. "A mouse trying to play pretend with the lions. It's just sad." He turned and walked away, his laughter echoing back to her. Elena sank back into the chair, her legs trembling. The cruelty was so familiar, so precise. He knew exactly where to cut. For a terrifying second, she believed him. She felt small. She felt worthless. She felt like the footnote he'd declared her to be. The sting of Richard's words sent her spiraling back to the damp, fluorescent-lit computer lab at Stanford, where they had first met. She had been a graduate student, head down in a complex thesis on neural networks. He had been a business student, cutting a swath through the campus with his charm and dazzling smile. He'd approached her, not with the awkward fumbling of her engineering peers, but with a confident, polished interest. "I hear you're the one who can actually make this stuff work," he'd said, gesturing to her screen full of code. He hadn't been wrong. Eleanor lived in a world of pure logic, a world where code was poetry, and algorithms were a language she spoke more fluently than English. Richard, she learned, lived in a world of presentations, networking, and narratives. He didn't understand her work, not really, but he understood, immediately, its value. "We're a team, Elle," he used to say, back when his eyes were still genuine. "You're the engine, I'm the steering wheel. We'll go places." And they did. She'd dropped her PhD to co-found Helios AI. Her parents had been worried, but Richard had been so persuasive. They married in a simple courthouse ceremony. The first 2 years were a blur of all-nighters, cheap pizza, and the thrill of creation. Elena coded, and Richard pitched, her algorithm, which could predict consumer behavior with terrifying accuracy, was their golden goose. They secured funding. Then more funding. The change in Richard was gradual, then sudden. The steering wheel began to believe it was the entire car. He started referring to her work as our work, then my work. He was the one on stage, the one giving interviews. Elena, who hated the spotlight, was content to stay in the background, to build, to solve. She was the chief technology officer, but at board meetings, Richard would often cut her off. Elena's getting into the weeds. He'd laugh. Let me give you the 30,000-foot view. He convinced her to put most of their joint assets into Helios AI stock, all under a complex holding company he controlled. It's smarter for tax purposes, Elle, he'd assured her. She, who could model quantum data, found herself baffled by the corporate legal jargon and trusted him. It was a devastating mistake. The patent she'd kept was a fluke. It was for a side project, an idea she'd had about using her AI for predictive logistics instead of human behavior. She'd filed it herself on a weekend, paying the small fee with her personal credit card. She'd told Richard about it, and he'd dismissed it. Logistics? Boring. Stick to the moneymaker, Elle. Stick to what we know. Then came the first signs of his infidelity. The late nights he couldn't explain, the scent of a perfume that wasn't hers, the sudden, obsessive focus on his appearance. When she finally confronted him, finding a hotel receipt in his suit pocket, he didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. It just happened, Elena, he'd said, as if discussing the weather. Chloe, she understands the pressure I'm under. She supports my vision. And I don't, Elena had whispered, the floor dropping out from under her. I wrote the vision, Richard. You wrote the code, he'd snapped, the mask of the charming husband falling away to reveal the cold, ruthless man beneath. The code is replaceable. I'm not. You're holding me back, Elena. You're a weight. The divorce was his final, brutal masterpiece. His lawyers, the best money could buy, systematically dismantled her contributions. They produced emails where Richard directed her research. He had just forwarded articles. They highlighted her lack of public-facing appearances as proof of her minor role. They portrayed her as a disgruntled employee, not a co-founder. When it came to the worthless patent, Richard's lawyer had literally scoffed in the deposition. Ms. Hayes is welcome to her little academic project. We, on the other hand, will be keeping the multi-billion-dollar enterprise. Elena, heartbroken and financially bled dry by her own lawyers, had no fight left in her. She signed the papers. She walked out of the courtroom, took a taxi to a tiny sublet apartment, and for the first time in her life, she didn't just cry. She wailed. She screamed into a pillow until her throat was raw, mourning the loss of her husband, her company, and her life's work. It was a full week before she opened her laptop. When she did, she saw the file containing the patent. Boring, he had called it. She opened it, her eyes scanning the complex mathematical proofs she'd written. A slow, cold anger began to burn away the grief. He was wrong. It wasn't boring. It was brilliant. And Richard, in his infinite arrogance, had left her with the one thing that could destroy him. He had taken the engine, yes, but she had kept the blueprint for a reactor. A new voice, sharp and professional, cut through her memory. Mom? Ms. Hayes? Elena blinked, the painful past receding. The lounge attendant, a young woman with a kind smile, was standing over her. I'm sorry to disturb you, Miss Hayes, but I have an update on your flight. Elena's stomach plummeted. A delay. A cancellation. They changed their minds. Richard, who had been holding court by the espresso machine, turned to watch, a smirk plastered on his face. He was waiting for the final humiliation, the moment the mouse was told to leave the lounge. "Yes?" Elena said, her voice barely a whisper. "Your aircraft has just landed," the attendant said, checking her tablet. "It's taxiing to the ramp now. The crew will be ready to welcome you aboard in approximately 15 minutes. May I get you a fresh coffee while you wait?" Elena stared at her. It's here?" "Yes, ma'am, right on schedule." The attendant smiled and walked away. Elena looked across the lounge. Richard's smirk had faltered. He looked confused. She could see the gears turning in his head. She's not being kicked out. Her flight is real. He exchanged a puzzled look with Chloe, who just shrugged and took a selfie. Elena turned to look out the massive, floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the tarmac, and her heart didn't just stop. It felt like it rebooted. Before the attendant's words had even fully registered, Richard was moving. The idea that Elena might have something he didn't, something he hadn't approved or wasn't aware of, was an offense to his entire sense of self. He left Chloe by the coffee bar and marched back over to Elena's chair. His smile was gone, replaced by a tight, inquisitive frown. "What is this, Elena? What did you do cash in your 401k for a one-way ticket on a charter, running away?" Elena turned from the window. The knot of fear in her stomach was loosening, replaced by a cold, hard sense of inevitability. The endgame was here. "I told you, Richard. I'm waiting for a flight." "Yes, but what flight? You don't have this kind of money. I know what you have. I know what I left you. It wasn't enough to get you a membership at a Costco, let alone a private jet." "Richard," Elena said, her voice low and steady. "This doesn't concern you." "Everything you do concerns me," he shot back, his voice rising. "You're still using my name." "Oh, wait. You went back to Hayes. Smart. Wouldn't want you dirtying up the Davenport brand." "Ricky," Chloe called, clicking her way over in stiletto-heeled boots. "What's taking so long? Our pilots are here. They're waiting." She held up her phone, showing a text message. "The citation is ready." Richard glanced at his watch, then back at Eleanor. He couldn't leave. Not without solving this puzzle. Not without re-establishing his dominance. "A citation latitude," he said to Eleanor, as if she should be impressed. "Top of its class. I'm sure your flight," he made air quotes with his fingers, "will be very comfortable. Does it have propellers? Do they give you a bag of peanuts?" He laughed. It was the laugh she hated, the laugh he'd used in the lawyer's office, the laugh he'd used in their bedroom when he told her she was a weight. It was loud, designed to draw attention, to make her the center of a humiliating spectacle, and it worked. The other occupants of the lounge, who had been politely ignoring them, were now looking over. They saw a man in a Zegna suit and a younger woman in Balenciaga, laughing at a plain woman in a beige cardigan. The story wrote itself. She was the poor relation, the ex-wife, the charity case. "Look at her, Chloe," Richard said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "She's actually blushing. She's embarrassed. It's okay, Eleanor. We've all been there. Well, not here," he gestured to the lounge, "but you know. Down on our luck. Maybe I can help you out. I could offer you a job. Helios is expanding. We could probably use a junior coder, or someone to fetch coffee. You were always good at that." The room was silent, save for Richard's mocking chuckle. Elena felt the stares of the other passengers like physical blows. A man in a pinstripe suit shook his head with a look of pity before turning back to his Wall Street Journal. Elena's face was burning, but not with embarrassment. It was with a rage so pure and cold it sharpened her senses. She could hear the hum of the ventilation, the soft click of Chloe's phone as she filmed this, and, faintly, the distant whine of a jet engine taxiing. She stood up again, her spine straight as a steel rod. "You're right about one thing, Richard," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. His smile widened. "Oh, yeah? What's that?" "I'm good at fetching coffee." She picked up her own untouched cup. "But I'm better at mathematics, and you were always terrible at it." Richard's face twitched. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you should have read the fine print. You should have paid attention in class. You took the house, the money, and the company. You took the shell, Richard. But you forgot the one thing that made it all work." He stared at her, the laughter finally dying in his throat. He had no idea what she was talking about. His arrogance had made him blind. He genuinely believed he was the genius. "You're pathetic," he finally spat, falling back on his old insults. "Delusional. You're sitting here, probably on a friends and family pass from some pilot you're dating, trying to lecture me about my business. You're a joke, Elena. You were a joke when we were married, and you're a bigger joke now." "Richard, let's go," Chloe whined, tugging at his sleeve. "You're making a scene, and not the fun kind." "In a second," he hissed. He leaned in, his face inches from hers. "You will always be nothing. You'll sit here and wait for your little puddle jumper, and I'll be an aspen, closing a deal that will make me a billionaire. Remember that. Remember this moment when you had the chance to be gracious, and you chose to be this." He turned his back on her, a final, dismissive act. He and Chloe began to walk toward the doors leading to the tarmac, their luggage gliding silently behind them. Elena just stood there. She watched him go. She felt the eyes of the lounge on her. She was, in that moment, exactly what he'd called her. The laughing stock. She closed her eyes and counted to 5, focusing on the sound of the approaching jet. It was closer now. Much closer. The journey from her apartment floor to this FBO lounge had been a brutal climb. After the divorce, Elena hadn't just lost her company, she'd lost her identity. For weeks, she'd done nothing but dissect her worthless patent. Richard's dismissal of it had been his single greatest error. He saw logistics, trucks, ships, warehouses. Elena saw a complex, dynamic system of predictive data, a problem far more challenging and valuable than predicting what brand of soda someone might buy. She'd built Phoenix Systems from nothing. Her office was a second-hand desk crammed into the corner of her studio apartment. Her boardroom was a local coffee shop with free Wi-Fi. She'd lived on instant noodles and the small, dwindling payout from the divorce. Every line of code was written with a desperate, burning intensity. She slept in 3-hour increments, her dreams filled with data strings and Richard's laughing face. She worked for a year in total isolation. No one knew what she was building. She'd learned her lesson. Never again would she share her work, her soul, with someone who saw it as a mere commodity. When the platform was stable, she didn't seek venture capital. She didn't pitch to smug young men in hoodies. She'd used her last $1,000 to hire a patent lawyer and secure her new IP. Then she'd crafted a single, perfect email. It wasn't sent to a venture capitalist. It was sent to the personal encrypted inbox of Julian Thorne, the reclusive, visionary CEO of Astra Dynamics. Thorne was a legend, a man who had built a global empire on technology that actually worked, not just on hype. He was known as a ruthless but fair operator who detested the kind of visionary salesman Richard pretended to be. Elena hadn't expected a reply. It was a shot in the dark, a final, desperate flare. The reply came 6 hours later. My office, Zurich, tomorrow. Astra Dynamics had sent a car. They had flown her, Economy Plus, to Switzerland. She'd walked into a boardroom that overlooked the Alps, her hands shaking, clutching her laptop. Julian Thorne wasn't a young man. He was in his late 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through her. She didn't give a sales pitch. She just opened her laptop and ran the demonstration. She showed him how her AI, Phoenix, could analyze global shipping routes, weather patterns, manufacturing chains, and political instability in real time, predicting and rerouting supply chains with 99.8% efficiency. It was a program that could save a company like Astra Dynamics billions. Thorne and his team of engineers watched, silent, for 2 hours. They asked her questions, not about profit margins or marketing, but about her architecture, her data modeling, her predictive decay algorithms. It was the most thrilling conversation of her life. At the end, Thorne had closed her laptop for her. "Ms. Hayes," he'd said, his voice gravelly, "you haven't just built a better logistics program. You've solved the problem of global freight. What do you want?" "I want to build," she'd said, her voice shaking but firm. "I want to see this work, and I want to ensure that Helios AI never benefits from a single line of my code again." Thorne had nodded, a thin smile playing on his lips. "Helios AI, Davenport's company. Don't worry about them. They're a ghost ship. They've been trying to win our primary logistics contract for a year, pitching us the very technology you invented. They just don't know how to make it work without you. They're irrelevant." The negotiations had been swift. Astra Dynamics wouldn't just buy her program, they would acquire Phoenix Systems. They would make Elena the head of their new global logistics division. The offer was staggering. It wasn't just rich. It was generational wealth. It was the power to build, to create, to be secure for the rest of her life. And today was the signing. The flight to Geneva was the final step. Elena's thoughts snapped back to the present. Richard and Chloe were at the glass doors, chatting with their pilots. Their ride, the Citation Latitude, was parked on the ramp. It was a nice plane, no doubt. Serviceable. But it was parked next to the aircraft that had just arrived for her. Elena's gaze drifted past the Citation to the machine that had just silenced the tarmac. It was magnificent. It wasn't just a plane, it was a statement. A Gulfstream G6 Faurtia, the largest, fastest, and longest-range business jet in the world. Its body was a sleek, pearlescent white, its twin engines mounted at the rear like the shoulders of a panther. The Astra Dynamics logo, a simple, stylized star, was painted elegantly on the high T-tail. It made the Citation look like a child's toy. The main door of the Gulfstream hissed open, and a set of polished aluminum stairs folded out, touching the tarmac with a soft, expensive thud. 2 pilots in crisp dark uniforms emerged, followed by a flight attendant in a sharp grey suit. Richard and Chloe, standing by their own aircraft, had stopped talking. They were openly staring at the G650. "My God," Chloe breathed, her voice carrying across the quiet ramp. "Who is that for? That's bigger than the one the Kardashians use." Richard was silent, his face a mask of confusion and envy. He knew planes. He knew exactly what that aircraft represented. It was $70 million of go anywhere, anytime power. It was the preferred transport of billionaires and heads of state. Back in the lounge, the kind-faced attendant approached Elena again. "Ms. Hayes, your party is here to escort you." Elena turned. Walking through the entrance from the reception area was a man she recognized, Julian Thorne's chief of staff, a formidable German man named Mr. Richter. He was dressed in a dark, perfectly tailored suit, his expression polite but intense. "Ms. Hayes," he said, offering a small, correct bow. "A pleasure. Mr. Thorne sends his apologies. He was held up in Singapore. He will meet you directly in Geneva. We are ready for you, if you are.
Thank you, Mr. Richter.
I'm ready, Elena said. She picked up her simple tote bag. Mr. Richter gestured to the glass doors leading to the tarmac. After you. Elena began to walk. The entire lounge was watching her. The man with the Wall Street Journal had lowered his paper completely. Her path took her directly past the espresso bar, where Richard and Chloe were now rushing back inside, their faces a picture of utter disbelief. Richard grabbed his pilot's arm. Is there a mistake? Who is that plane for? The pilot just shrugged. No mistake, Mr. Davenport. That's N400 AD, Astra Dynamics' flagship. She's here for a Ms. Elena Hayes. Richard's head snapped toward Elena. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The blood drained from his face, leaving him a sickly, pale grey. Chloe looked from Richard to Elena, and back again. Elena. Hayes. Her. Ricky, what is going on? That's not possible. She's a nobody. Elena didn't stop walking. She walked past the espresso bar, past the staring receptionists, and toward the door. Mr. Richter held it open for her. As she passed, she was now only feet from Richard. He was trembling, his arrogant composure completely shattered. Elena, he stammered, his voice a hoarse whisper. Elena, what is this? Is this a joke? Who are you with? What did you do? Elena paused, her hand on the door. She looked at him. Not with anger. Not with pity. She looked at him with the cool, detached gaze of a scientist observing a failed experiment. I told you, Richard. You were always terrible at math. You thought you had the whole equation. What? What are you talking about? He whispered, desperate. You took Helios. You kept the brand. You kept the offices. But the algorithm that ran it? My algorithm? It had a kill switch, Richard. A back door I built in, just in case. The one you and your high-priced lawyers never found. Richard's eyes widened in dawning horror. What did you do? I didn't do anything, Elena said calmly. The code just expired. The core logic was designed to decay and become obsolete after 2 years without my maintenance key. That was, let me see. She tapped a finger to her chin. About 6 months ago, right around the time your stock began to tank, right around the time Astra Dynamics pulled their contract bid from you. They don't like investing in ghost ships. She had just used Thorne's own words. The realization hit Richard like a physical blow. It wasn't just that she had succeeded. It was that she was the reason he was failing. His company wasn't just struggling. It was an empty shell, and she held the key. He wasn't on his way to Aspen for a new round of funding. He was here, on a chartered citation, to beg a minor investor for a bridge loan just to make payroll. And he was going to be denied. He was ruined. And she had done it. You bitch, he breathed, his voice thick with a hatred that was pure and impotent. Chloe just stared, her mouth agape. But he's... Elena didn't grace his insult with a response. She simply turned away from him, pulling her tote bag onto her shoulder. Mr. Richter, she said, I'd like to go now. I have a signing to get to. Of course, Miss Hayes. This way. Mr. Richter guided her out the door. The crisp November air hit her face. It smelled like jet fuel and freedom. Elena stepped onto the tarmac. The ground beneath her feet felt solid. The whine of the GX150ER's auxiliary power unit was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. It was the sound of her future. She walked across the tarmac, Mr. Richter by her side. The flight attendant was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, smiling. Welcome, Ms. Hayes. We have your preferred tea, the Silver Needle, and the briefing for your flight to Geneva. Thank you, Elena said, her voice steady. She put her foot on the first step. Behind her, she heard a commotion. "Elena, wait! You can't just—" "You can't." Richard had burst through the lounge doors, running onto the tarmac, his $3,000 shoes slipping on the painted lines. Chloe was right behind him, shrieking his name. An FBO security guard was already moving to intercept him. "Elena, please!" he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "We can fix this. We can be partners again. I'll get rid of her. We can have it back, like it was. I need you." The last 3 words hung in the air, a pathetic, raw confession. He did need her. He always had. He just hadn't known it until this very second. Elena paused on the steps. She turned, looking down at the man who had shattered her life. He was a mess. His perfect hair was mussed. His face was blotchy and terrified. The security guard had him by the arm, but he was still reaching for her. She looked at him. The man she had once loved. The man who had called her a footnote. And she felt nothing. No, that wasn't true. She felt a profound, deep and final sense of release. The ghost that had haunted her was finally gone. "Goodbye, Richard," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. It was a final judgment. She turned her back on him for the last time. She walked up the remaining stairs and into the cabin of the Gulfstream. The interior was a cavern of cream leather, polished dark wood, and soft, indirect lighting. It was quiet, peaceful. The flight attendant pulled the heavy door shut, and the latch engaged with a solid, satisfying thunk. The noise of the tarmac and Richard's desperate shouts was cut off completely. Elena sank into a seat that felt like a cloud. The flight attendant handed her a warm towel. "We are cleared for takeoff, Ms. Hayes. We should be in the air in 5 minutes." Elena nodded, fastening her seatbelt. She looked out the large oval window. She saw Richard, a small, defeated figure, being escorted back into the lounge by security. She saw Chloe, standing frozen by the citation, her hands over her mouth. Then, the massive Rolls-Royce engines of the GE-Infanterie spooled up. The jet began to move, gliding smoothly away from the FBO. It taxied to the runway, paused for a moment, and then, with a powerful, breathtaking roar, it accelerated. Elena was pushed back into her seat as the plane lifted off the ground, climbing steeply into the bright, clear sky. She watched as Teterboro, then New Jersey, then the entire messy, painful chapter of her past shrank away beneath her, disappearing into the clouds. She was flying toward Geneva. She was flying toward her future, and she was, finally, free. The Gulfstream GA-50ER did not so much climb as it ascended. It was a quiet, relentless push against gravity, a smooth, vibration-free transition from the Earth to the stratosphere. Elena was pinned, gently, to the plush, cream-colored leather, a sensation so different from the rattling, jostling fight of a commercial jet. Below her, the patchwork of New Jersey dissolved into a blur, then was obscured by a flawless white blanket of clouds. The sun, bright and unfiltered at 41,000 feet, filled the cabin with a clean, antiseptic light. For the first 10 minutes, she didn't move. She just stared out the window, her heart rate slowly returning to normal. The image of Richard's face, pale, terrified, and distorted by his own desperate shouts, was burned into her memory. She had expected to feel a rush of triumphant joy, a giddy, vindictive pleasure. Instead, she felt quiet. It was the profound, echoing silence of a heavy iron door clanging shut on a prison cell, a cell she hadn't even fully realized she was in. "Ms. Hayes?" Elena turned. The flight attendant, a poised woman with a soft Scandinavian accent, was smiling at her. "May I offer you something to drink? We have a 2008 Dom Perignon on ice, or I can prepare that silver needle tea you requested." Eleanor looked down at her beige cardigan, at the simple tote bag at her feet. "The tea would be lovely. Thank you, Kirsten," she said, reading the attendant's name badge. A moment later, Mr. Richter emerged from the forward cabin, holding a sleek, leather-bound binder. He took the seat opposite her. He was not a man for small talk. "A good departure," he stated, placing the binder on the polished table between them. "Mr. Thorne asked me to brief you en route. He felt it best you arrive." "Prepared." "Prepared for what, exactly?" Elena asked, accepting the delicate porcelain cup of tea from Kirsten. "For the scale of your new operation," Richter said. He tapped the binder. "This is not a simple acquisition, Ms. Hayes. This is a corporate realignment. Astra Dynamics is not just buying Phoenix Systems. We are building our entire global logistics division around it. And around you." He opened the binder. The first page was an organizational chart. At the top, in a simple, bold box, was Julian Thorne. Directly beneath him was a new corresponding box, Astra Global Dynamics, AGD. And inside that box, one name, Elena Hayes, Director. Elena felt her breath catch. This was not a middle management position. This was not a team lead role. The chart showed nearly 400 employees across 3 continents, in Hamburg, Singapore, and Los Angeles, who would, as of Liro 900 tomorrow, report to her. "This is," she began, her mind racing, "this is significantly larger than I anticipated." "Mr. Thorne does not do things in small measures," Richter said, his face unreadable. "He is not buying your past work. He is investing in your future potential. The financial package you agreed to is, of course, secure. But this is the work." He turned the page. It was a budget proposal. The numbers were so large they looked like typos. The allocation for R&D alone was more than the entire valuation of Helios AI at its peak. "Your first directive," Richter continued, "is to integrate your Phoenix platform into our existing infrastructure. Mr. Thorne has authorized a complete server overhaul. You will have carte blanche. You will select the hardware, the team, and the timeline. You are expected to have the system fully operational within 6 months. The board will be monitoring your progress." Elena leaned back, the warmth of the teacup seeping into her cold hands. The fear that had briefly surfaced was replaced by a familiar electric hum. It was the feeling she got when faced with an impossible equation, a complex problem that begged to be solved. She wasn't intimidated, she was hungry. "The timeline is too long," she said, her voice sharp and clear. Richter paused, raising an eyebrow. "I beg your pardon." 6 months is too long. The code is stable. The weakness isn't the platform, it's the integration. If I have the budget you've listed here, and full administrative access, I can have the core system integrated and running in 90 days. We can be beta testing by the new year. I'll need to handpick a red team from your existing cybersecurity division to try and break it. Richter stared at her for a long moment. The polite professional mask wavered, replaced by a flicker of genuine respect. "I see," he said. "Mr. Thorne was correct about you." "And the team," Elena continued, flipping through the personnel files. "These division heads in Hamburg and Singapore. Their logistics experience is based on the old models. They'll resist. I need to fly to Hamburg first, then Singapore. I need to be on the ground, with my engineers. A video call won't be sufficient." "Mr. Thorne anticipated that as well," Richter said, a thin smile touching his lips. "The G650 is at your disposal, Director. Your travel schedule will be managed by my office." "Director." The title landed with a solid, physical weight. This was real. The rest of the 7-hour flight passed in a blur of focused work. Kirsten brought them a meal of seared scallops and risotto, which Elena ate while dissecting a complex data flow schematic. She had, in the space of a transatlantic flight, transitioned from ex-wife to executive. When she finally closed the binder, the sun was setting ahead of them, painting the sky in violent streaks of purple and orange. She had completely forgotten about Richard. They landed in Geneva just after 10 Mauthausen p.m. local time. The descent was as smooth as the ascent. As Eleanor looked out the window, the lights of the city glittered around the dark, placid shape of Lake Geneva. There was no terminal. The jet taxied to a private, silent hangar where a black Mercedes-Maybach S-Class was waiting, its engine purring. "Mr. Thorne is waiting at the headquarters," Richter said, ushering her from the jet stairs directly into the back of the sedan. The air was cold, crisp, and smelled of pine. The drive was silent. Elena watched the immaculate, ancient city roll by. In the seatback pocket, a tablet was displaying international news. A headline from the Financial Times caught her eye. Helios AI stock in freefall as CEO Davenport faces crisis of confidence. She tapped it. The article was brief and brutal. The stock had halted trading after plummeting 68% in a single day. Rumors of a catastrophic systems failure, coupled with the loss of a major potential contract, whispered to be with conglomerate Astra Dynamics, have gutted the company's value. Analysts are raising long-dormant questions about the company's core IP, which many believe was tied to co-founder Elena Hayes, who left the company years ago. CEO Richard Davenport was unavailable for comment. Elena switched off the tablet. It was done. The equation was balanced. There was no joy, only a quiet, logical finality. The Astra Dynamics headquarters was a blade of dark glass and steel that rose from the lake's edge. It was a building that radiated power. They were escorted, not to a waiting room, but directly to the penthouse floor. The office was vast, a minimalist expanse of stone and glass overlooking the entire city. Julian Thorne stood from behind a massive empty desk. He was, as she remembered, imposing. He wore a simple black turtleneck and grey trousers, but he commanded the room. "Ms. Hayes," he said, his voice a low gravel. "Good flight?" "Productive," Elena said, shaking his offered hand. His grip was firm. "So Richter tells me, you believe you can beat our timeline by 3 months?" "I know I can," she replied. "Good," Thorne said. He gestured to the desk. A single, thick document and a pen were laid out. "Our lawyers are present, but I find them tedious. I will summarize. This document gives you full control of the Astra Global Dynamics division. Your compensation is as agreed. Your budget is as stated. Your authority is second only to mine. You will succeed, or you will fail, entirely on your own merits. I do not tolerate excuses, and I do not reward failure. I do, however, reward results. Do we have an understanding?" This was a world away from Richard, with his empty charm, his stolen credit, his promises of vision. This was a stark, cold, and thrilling meritocracy. "A perfect understanding, Mr. Thorne," Elena said. She picked up the pen. It was heavy, made of cold, black metal. She found the signature line. Elena Hayes. She signed her name. Her handwriting, once small and precise, now looked bold, the ink flowing thick and dark on the heavy paper. "Excellent," Thorne said. He did not smile. He simply nodded. The deal concluded. "Welcome to Astra, Director Hayes." He buzzed his intercom. "Richter, take Director Hayes to her residence. Have our tailor meet her there in the morning, and clear my schedule for Route 900. I want to be at her first briefing." "Yes, sir," Richter said. He turned to Eleanor. "This way, Director." As Eleanor followed him out, she paused at the door, catching her reflection in the dark glass. She saw a woman in a practical, worn, beige cardigan, her hair pulled back in a simple tie, her face pale with exhaustion. But her eyes were different. They were sharp, focused, and utterly devoid of fear. Thorne spoke one last time, without turning around. "Oh, and Director Hayes?" "Yes, Mr. Thorne?" "That cardigan. Burn it. You're not a footnote. You're the one writing the book." Eleanor nodded, a small, sharp smile touching her lips for the first time. "Consider it done." She walked out of the office, the heavy doors closing behind her, not on a new life, but on a life she had finally, fully, claimed for herself. The work was just beginning. Elena's story isn't just about the jet. It's about the silence, the silent work, the silent pain, and the silent strength that builds when no one is watching. She proved that success isn't about the noise you make or the credit you take. It's about the foundation you build. The world and the people in it may try to tell you you're a footnote. They may laugh at you from their own small planes. But the future belongs to those who, like Elena, have the courage to build their own wings. What did you think of Elena's ultimate comeback? Do you believe in this kind of karma, where true talent and hard work finally win? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and resilience, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life drama. The wipers on the Bentley fought a losing battle against the storm. Arthur Vance stared through the glass, not at the gridlocked Seattle traffic, but at the numbers on his phone. 7 million. That was the profit from the quarterly report. It meant nothing. He was cold, empty, and on his way to a charity gala he despised, all to appease a fiancée he didn't love. Then his driver slowed. Arthur barked, "What is it, Marcus?" But his driver just pointed. There, huddled at a bus stop, soaked to the bone by a passing truck's spray, was a woman. She was trying to shield a small child. The woman looked up, her face illuminated by the headlights, and Arthur's multi-million-dollar world simply stopped. It was Eleanor. The November rain didn't just fall. It attacked. It hammered the reinforced glass of Arthur Vance's Bentley Mulsanne, a sound like angry fists drumming on his isolated, climate-controlled world. Arthur despised this weather. He despised this city. He despised the fact that his driver, Marcus, was taking the surface streets instead of the freeway. "This traffic is unacceptable," Arthur muttered, pinching the bridge of his nose. He was 42, with a face that had once been handsome and open, but was now chiseled into a mask of impatient success. His suit was a custom Tom Ford, and the cufflinks pressing into his wrists were platinum. "Apologies, Mr. Vance," Marcus said, his voice flat. "There's an overturned truck on the I-5. This is, unfortunately, the faster route to the gala." The gala. Another night of shaking hands, smiling at fools, and pretending his fiancée, Clarissa DeWitt, was more than a strategic merger of two powerful families. His life was a series of transactions, and he was winning. He'd built Vance Tech Solutions from nothing, a phoenix from the ashes of, well, from the ashes. He glanced at his phone. The market was up. His net worth had ticked over another milestone. He felt nothing. "Just get me there," Arthur said. The car crawled past the corner of Mercer and 4th. The bus stop was little more than a flimsy piece of plexiglass that offered no protection. Underneath it, two figures were pressed against the flimsy wall. A woman and a child so small she was barely visible behind the woman's thin coat. They were drenched, not just damp. They were transparently, dangerously soaked. The woman's hair, a dark brown color he'd once known better than his own, was plastered to her skull. Look at that, Marcus murmured, more to himself. Shame. A city bus, running late, roared past the stop without slowing. It hit a deep puddle, sending a tidal wave of filthy, ice-cold gutter water directly onto the two figures. The woman turned, taking the full force of the spray to shield the child. Arthur felt an unfamiliar jolt. Not pity, he'd stifled that emotion years ago. It was recognition. Stop the car, Marcus. Sir, we're blocking traffic. I said, stop the car. Arthur hit the button to lower his window. The frigid, wet air instantly fogged his glasses. He pulled them off. The woman at the bus stop was shaking, trying to zip the child's tiny jacket higher, her own lips blue. She looked up, startled by the idling limousine. The world tilted. The traffic, the rain, the gala, the $7 million profit. It all dissolved. It was Eleanor Rostova. He hadn't seen her in 7 years. Not since the day he'd thrown her out, accusing her of theft, of betrayal, of destroying the one thing he'd ever loved. She looked older. The spark in her eyes, the one that had lit up their tiny, broke apartment, was gone. She was thin, worn down to the bone by a life he had never bothered to wonder about. And then he saw the child. The little girl, who couldn't be more than 6 or 7, peered around her mother's leg. She had Elena's dark hair, but her eyes. Arthur felt the air leave his lungs. He was looking at his own eyes, the same intense, steel-blue eyes that stared back at him from the mirror every morning. He fumbled for the door handle, pushing it open. The rain hit him instantly, soaking his $1,000 suit jacket. Arthur. Elena's voice was a ghost, a whisper he wasn't sure he'd actually heard. She staggered back, pulling the child behind her. It wasn't recognition, it was fear. Elena, he said, his own voice sounding foreign. Mommy? The little girl whimpered, burying her face in Elena's coat. Mommy, who is that man? I'm cold. The child's voice broke the spell. The rage that had fueled Arthur for 7 years vanished, replaced by a sudden, terrifying cold that had nothing to do with the rain. Get in the car, he said. It wasn't a request. It was a command, born of pure, unadulterated shock. No, Elena said, her teeth chattering. We're fine. We're just waiting for the next bus. The next bus is in 20 minutes, and you'll both be hypothermic. Get in the car. He didn't wait for an answer. He strode forward, grabbed the child's small, cold hand, and then took Elena's arm. She was too weak, too cold to fight. He guided them, or, more accurately, pulled them, to the open door of the Bentley. Marcus, his face a perfect mask of professional neutrality, was already out with an umbrella. But it was useless. Arthur practically pushed them into the plush, cream-colored leather seats, the smell of rain and wet wool and poverty filling his pristine car. He got in after them and slammed the door. The world went silent again, save for the hum of the engine and the frantic, tiny chattering of the little girl's teeth. Marcus, Arthur said, his voice dangerously quiet. Take us to the Olympic Peninsula Hotel, the penthouse suite. Sir, what about the gala? Mrs. DeWitt. Call Clarissa, Arthur snapped, not taking his eyes off the child. Tell her I have a family emergency. Tell her whatever you want. Just drive. He turned. Elena was staring at him, her face pale, water dripping from her hair onto the priceless leather. The little girl was looking with wide, terrified eyes at the man who had just stolen them from the rain. Who are you? The girl whispered. Arthur looked at Elena. Elena, he demanded, his voice shaking for the first time. Who is she? Elena closed her eyes. Her name, she said, her voice breaking, is Lily. She's 6. Arthur did the math. 7 years. He had thrown Elena out 7 years ago. He looked at Lily, at her high cheekbones, the shape of her mouth, and the steel blue eyes that were a perfect copy of his own. This wasn't just his ex-wife. This was his daughter, and he had just found her, half frozen, on the side of the road. The ride to the hotel was a suffocating 10-minute eternity. Arthur turned the heat up so high it was almost unbearable, but Lily, wrapped in a cashmere blanket he'd pulled from the back, was still shivering. Elena said nothing. She just stared out the window, her reflection a pale mask superimposed over the glittering, wet city she had once owned alongside him. Arthur couldn't stop staring at the girl. His daughter. His daughter. The words were alien. 7 years ago, he hadn't just been a man. He'd been half of a whole. Arthur and Eleanor. They were partners in a tiny, failing tech startup called Nexus Core. They lived on instant ramen and dreams, working 20-hour days in a garage, fueled by coffee and a brilliant, shared vision of the future. He remembered their small, dingy apartment. He remembered kissing her by the light of a laptop screen, her hair smelling like cheap shampoo and the ozone from the servers. They were going to change the world. Then Julian Thorne had entered the picture. Julian, with his slick venture capital connections and his predatory smile. He'd invested, becoming their third partner. And for a while, it was perfect. They were expanding. They were on the verge of a breakthrough. The memory that followed was so vivid, it felt like it was happening now. He'd gone into the office on a Sunday, planning to surprise Elena. He'd found her computer unlocked, and he'd seen the emails. He saw the thread between Elena and Julian. He saw the wire transfers to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, an account number he didn't recognize. He saw plans, coded language, discussions of exit strategy, and phasing Arthur out. It wasn't just theft. It was a coup. She wasn't just stealing his money. She was stealing his company, his dream. And she was doing it with Julian. The fight was apocalyptic. He had printed the emails. He'd thrown them at her. What is this, Elena? What is Project Horizon? She'd looked at the papers, her face going white. Arthur, it's not what it looks like. It looks like you're robbing me blind. You and Julian. You were going to take everything and leave me with nothing. No, that's not what's happening. You have to let me explain. Explain what? How you've been sleeping with him? How long has this been going on? Was any of it real? That was the blow that had broken her. He could see it. The hurt in her eyes was so profound, it eclipsed the confusion. She didn't scream. She didn't fight back. She just deflated. If that, she had whispered, her voice dead, is what you truly believe I am capable of, then there's nothing left to say. Get out, he'd roared, his voice cracking with a pain so immense he'd mistaken it for rage. Get out of my company. Get out of my life. She had. She packed a single bag and walked out. He'd expected her to call, to beg, to explain. She never did. The next day, Julian Thorne came to the office, feigning shock. Arthur, I can't believe she'd do this to us. I had no idea. Arthur, blinded by his pain, had cut Julian in on a bigger share. It's just us now, he'd said. We'll build it bigger than she ever dreamed. He poured his fury and his broken heart into the company. He rebranded it Vance Tech Solutions. He worked until his fingers bled and his eyes burned. He became ruthless. He cut out partners, crushed competitors, and clawed his way to the top. He never looked back. He never spoke her name again. He built an empire of glass and steel on the foundation of her betrayal. And now, that foundation was cracking. The Bentley pulled into the private motor court of the Olympic Peninsula Hotel. The doorman, stunned to see Mr. Vance's car and not a taxi, rushed over. "Mr. Vance, we weren't expecting you." "Get us a doctor," Arthur commanded, as he lifted the sleeping, blanket-wrapped form of Lily from the car. "Send Dr. Alan Sinclair to the penthouse. Tell him it's an emergency." He strode into the lobby, Elena trailing behind him like a shadow. People stared. The billionaire Arthur Vance, in a rain-soaked, ruined suit, carrying a shivering, unconscious child, followed by a woman who looked like a refugee. He didn't care. He took the private elevator. The penthouse was a sprawling, 3-bedroom masterpiece of glass and minimalist design, with a view that spanned from the Space Needle to the Puget Sound. It was sterile, cold, and utterly silent. He laid Lily down on a $20,000 sofa. "There are showers," he said to Eleanor, his voice rough. "Go, get warm. There are robes in the master bedroom. Order food. Anything you want." Eleanor didn't move. She just stared at her daughter. She gets so cold," she whispered. "Why are you here, Eleanor?" Arthur asked, the old anger mixing with the new, terrifying confusion. "Why are you in Seattle, and why did you never tell me?" Elena finally looked at him. Her eyes were not the eyes of a thief or a traitor. They were the eyes of a martyr. "Tell you what, Arthur," she said, her voice hollow. "That I was pregnant." "Why?" "So you could accuse me of trying to trap you. So you could add liar and thief to the list of things you called me." "She's my daughter," he yelled, the sound echoing in the vast, empty room. "She's my daughter," Elena cried back, a sudden fire in her. "I'm the one who was there. I'm the one who held her when she was sick. I'm the one who went without food so she could eat. Where were you, Arthur?" "Oh, that's right. You were on the cover of Forbes, accepting an award with your new, perfect fiancé. You didn't want a child from a woman you thought was a criminal." Before Arthur could answer, the elevator chimed, and a grey-haired man in a crisp suit hurried in with a medical bag. "Arthur, what on earth is—" Dr. Sinclair stopped, taking in the scene. The soaked woman, the pale child on the couch. He was a professional. "Right, what have we got?" "She's cold," Arthur said, his voice clipped. "She was in the rain for, I don't know, an hour? Maybe more." The doctor rushed to Lily, unwrapping the blanket. He put a stethoscope to her small chest, listening intently. Eleanor was at his side in an instant, her hand on Lily's forehead. "Her breathing," Eleanor said, her voice tight with panic. It's not right. It's too shallow." Dr. Sinclair listened, his brow furrowing. "Her heart rate is thready, and her breathing. There's a significant murmur." He looked up at Eleanor, his gaze sharp. "Does she have a history of cardiac issues?" Eleanor's face crumpled. "Yes," she whispered, tears finally breaking free. "She has a congenital heart defect. Tetralogy of Fallot. She needs her medication. I think I dropped it. At the bus stop. I lost her medicine." Arthur felt the floor drop out from beneath him. His daughter, his unknown 6-year-old daughter, had a heart condition. And she was in his penthouse, freezing and without her medication, because her mother, the woman he'd despised for 7 years, was too poor to own a car. Or, it seemed, even a home. The weight of his own cruelty, his own colossal, life-altering mistake, settled on him like a shroud. Dr. Alan Sinclair's movements became sharp, precise, and urgent. He snapped open his bag, pulling out a pediatric pulse oximeter and clipping it to Lily's tiny finger. The machine's small screen lit up with numbers that meant nothing to Arthur, but to the doctor they were clearly an alarm. "Her O2 sats are in the low 80s, Sinclair said, his voice grim. "This isn't just hypothermia. She's in distress." He looked at Elena. "The medication. What is it?" Propranolol? Furosemide?" "Both," Elena whispered, her body trembling so hard she had to grip the back of the sofa. "A beta blocker and a diuretic. We had an appointment at the county clinic today. They were adjusting the dosage. We were on our way back to the shelter. When you—" She looked at Arthur, her expression a mix of anguish and pure, unadulterated hatred. The word shelter hit Arthur like a physical blow. A homeless shelter. His ex-wife and his child were living in a homeless shelter. "We have to get her to a hospital," Dr. Sinclair said, already on his phone. "I'm calling St. Jude's. I want the pediatric cardiac unit on standby. Get me Dr. Chen, now." He turned to Arthur. "I'll ride with them in the ambulance. You follow. We need to get her stabilized." "I'm coming with her," Elena said, her voice suddenly iron. She was gathering Lily's wet, limp form into her arms. "No," Arthur said, his own voice sounding hollow. "You're soaked. You're in shock. You'll be no good to her." He stripped off his ruined suit jacket and his cashmere waistcoat, leaving him in just his dress shirt. He took a heavy, dry robe from the master closet and thrust it at Eleanor. "Put this on. Now. Marcus will bring you to the hospital. I'm going in the ambulance. She's my responsibility." Eleanor looked as if she was about to fight him, to claw his eyes out. But one look at Lily's blue-tinged lips, and she knew he was right. She couldn't help her daughter like this. She took the robe, her hands shaking. The next 30 minutes were a blur of sirens, medics, and the sterile smell of the ambulance. Arthur sat on a small bench, his world shrunk to the interior of a swaying, lurching box. He watched Dr. Sinclair and a paramedic work on his daughter, a child whose name he had learned less than an hour ago. They put a small oxygen mask over her face. He saw her small chest rise and fall, a fragile, fluttering movement that terrified him. He looked at her face, really looked at it, for the first time. She had his jawline. She had a small mole on her left cheek in the exact same spot as his own. How had he ever believed Elena could betray him? How had he been so consumed by his own wounded pride that he'd thrown away the only person who had ever seen him as more than a dollar sign? He had spent 7 years building an empire, all to prove to a ghost that he didn't need her. He'd gotten engaged to Clarissa DeWitt, a woman who understood balance sheets but not human emotion, because it was a good match. He had become a hollow caricature of success. And all the while, this child, his child, was breathing, growing, and suffering. They burst through the doors of the St. Jude's private wing. Because he was Arthur Vance, a team was waiting. He was Mr. Vance, a name that parted crowds and summoned the best doctors. Lily was whisked away into a room marked Pediatric Cardiac Intensive Care Unit. He was left in the hallway. The adrenaline faded, leaving him standing in his shirt sleeves, his trousers soaked and muddy, his hair matted from the rain. He was a mess. A moment later, the elevator doors opened, and Eleanor ran out, now wrapped in his absurdly large monogrammed robe. Marcus was behind her. "Where is she?" Eleanor demanded, her eyes wild. "They're with her now. Dr. Sinclair and a specialist. Dr. Chen." Eleanor rushed to the door, but a nurse gently stopped her. "They're stabilizing her, Mum. We'll let you in the second we can." Elena slumped against the wall, her energy gone. She slid down until she was sitting on the polished hospital floor, her head in her hands. Arthur just stood there, a few feet away, a useless king in his own empty castle. "A shelter, Elena?" he finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. It came to that. She looked up, and the hatred was back, burning bright. "What did you expect, Arthur? After you After you left, I had nothing. You locked me out of the company. You locked me out of our bank account. You told everyone I was a thief. Julian Thorne made sure that story spread. No one in the tech world would hire me. No one." He winced. He had done that. In his rage, he had systematically destroyed her reputation. "I found out I was pregnant a week after I left," she continued, her voice gaining a bitter strength. "I was living in a room I'd rented by the week. I was going to call you. I was terrified, and I missed you, and I thought maybe the baby would fix us, that you'd finally listen to me." "I would have," he said, the words tasting like ash. "Elena, I swear I would have." "Would you?" she scoffed. "I picked up the newspaper to find your number, and there you were, page 6. Tech's newest titan, Arthur Vance, celebrates his Vance Tech launch with socialite Clarissa DeWitt. You were kissing her, Arthur. On the steps of the public library, you were smiling. You looked so happy you'd replaced me in a week." He flinched. He remembered that night. He'd been drunk, miserable, and Clarissa had thrown herself at him. The photo had been a PR stunt, but Elena didn't know that. "I knew, right then," Elena said, tears streaming down her face, "that you were gone. You had your money, your new woman, and your new life. You'd already made your choice, so I made mine. I wouldn't let my child be raised by a man who could throw her mother away like she was garbage. I wouldn't let you hate her because you hated me. So, I disappeared." She had. She'd moved to Oregon. She'd worked as a waitress, a coder for tiny, under-the-table projects, anything to keep them fed. She'd given Lily her own last name, Rostova. They'd been fine, she said, until Lily's heart condition worsened 6 months ago. The medical bills were astronomical. She'd drained her savings. She'd sold her car. She came back to Seattle because the pediatric cardiac care at the county clinic was supposed to be the best. She'd run out of money a week ago. They'd been in the shelter for 3 nights when he found them. "Her heart," Arthur said, his throat tight. "The defect." "The doctors said it's genetic," Elena said. "They asked about my family history. I told them I didn't know. Then they asked about her father's side." The unspoken question hung in the air. Dr. Sinclair emerged from the room, his face grave. "She's stable," he said, and both Arthur and Eleanor sagged with relief. "Her oxygen is up. We've administered her medication. But, Arthur, we need to talk." He led them to a private consultation room. "Lily's condition, it's advanced. The medication is a stopgap. She's in stage 3 heart failure. She needs surgery, Arthur, a full repair." "Then do it," Arthur said immediately. "Book the best surgeon. I'll pay whatever it costs." "It's not that simple," Dr. Sinclair said, looking at a file. "It's a high-risk procedure. But more than that, she's going to need a compatible blood donor on standby. A lot of blood. She has a very rare blood type. AB negative." Elena shook her head. "I'm O positive. I can't." Arthur felt a cold dread, a different kind of dread. "AB negative," he repeated. It was the same as his. Dr. Sinclair looked at him. "Yes, just like yours." The implication was clear. Elena looked at Arthur, and for the first time, the hatred in her eyes was replaced by something else. Stark, primal fear. Not for him, but of what he would do next. "She's my daughter," Arthur stated, not to Eleanor, but to the doctor. "She's my daughter, and my blood type is AB negative. Test me. Do whatever you need to do. But you will save her." Arthur Vance did not sleep. While Elena stayed by Lily's bedside, finally allowed in to hold her daughter's hand, Arthur returned to the penthouse. The sterile, silent apartment felt like a tomb. He saw the wet, muddy footprints on his white rug, the only evidence that the most important event of his life had even happened. His mind was a forge. The rage was back, but it was no longer aimed at the ghost of Eleanor. It was aimed at a living, breathing man. Julian Thorne. Arthur sat at his desk, a sleek black slab of obsidian, and opened his laptop. He wasn't just a businessman. At his core, he was a programmer, and he was the one who had built the original architecture for Nexus Core. He called his head of security, a former Mossad agent named Ben. "I need you to do something for me, and I need it done before sunrise. I want everything you can find on Julian Thorne. Financials, travel, communications, everything." "Is he a threat?" Ben asked. "He's a dead man," Arthur replied, and hung up. While Ben's team went to work on the present, Arthur dug into the past. He still had the old Nexus Core servers in a deep storage facility. He'd kept them for tax purposes, a digital relic of his origin story. He initiated a remote connection. He typed in his old admin credentials. Access granted. He went to the email server. He found the thread, the one he had printed out 7 years ago. He read it again. But this time, he wasn't a betrayed lover. He was a forensic analyst. The language. Exit strategy. Phasing Arthur out. It looked damning. But now, he saw the technical precision. Julian was the one using the emotional, suggestive language. Elena's replies were short, technical. Confirming fund transfer. Acknowledging new protocol. He went deeper, into the server's root logs, the immutable record of every keystroke, every file transfer. This was a place no one ever looked. He searched for the Cayman Islands account number. He found it. But it wasn't in an email from Eleanor. The first instance of it was in a system log, linked to Julian's IP address. Julian had created the account. Arthur's blood ran cold. He kept digging. He found the Project Horizon file. He had assumed it was their plan to steal the company. He opened it. It wasn't a business plan. It was a medical research file. He read, his horror mounting. It was a file on congenital heart defects, specifically tetralogy of Fallot. He cross-referenced the dates. Elena had started this file 2 weeks before their big fight. She had been researching her family's medical history. She must have had an inkling of fear. Then he found the real exit strategy. It was an email from Julian to his private equity partners, the ones Arthur never met. In it, Julian laid out a plan to leverage Arthur's emotional instability and his problematic partner, Elena, to trigger a buyout clause, seize control of the company, and cut Arthur out completely. Julian had been playing them both. He'd been siphoning money, not from the company, but from Arthur's personal investment funds, and moving them through the Cayman account. He'd used Elena's legitimate research into her family's medical trust, which was based in the Caymans, to mask his own theft. He had spoofed Elena's email address, making it look like she was his accomplice, and planted the evidence for Arthur to find. Julian hadn't just framed Elena to get rid of her. He had used Arthur's predictable, blinding rage as the weapon to destroy his own company. But the plan had backfired. Arthur's rage hadn't made him fold, it had made him a monster. He'd burned the company to the ground, fired everyone, cut Julian out, and rebuilt it as Vanstech, a new entity, from the ashes. He had, in effect, accidentally saved his creation by destroying it. Julian, left with nothing but the few 100,000 he'd managed to steal, had been forced to beg to be let back in as a minor executive at the new company. Arthur stared at the screen. The truth laid bare in lines of green code. Elena hadn't betrayed him. She had been his only defender. Julian was the serpent, and he Arthur, had been the fool. He had believed the lie because it was easier to believe in betrayal than in his own bad judgment. He had built his entire life, his entire fortune, on a catastrophic, unforgivable mistake. He looked at the clock. 4 a.m. His phone buzzed. It was Ben. "I've got him," Ben said. "Thorne's been living well above his salary for 7 years. 2 condos in Miami, a boat. He's smart. He's been using a shell corporation, funneling money from a subsidiary in Singapore. A subsidiary you put him in charge of." "He never stopped," Arthur breathed. "He's been stealing from me this entire time." "Looks like it," Ben said. "What do you want me to do?" "Lock him down," Arthur said, his voice pure ice. "Freeze his accounts, every last one. Put a tail on him. I want to know when he blinks. And Ben, send a cleaning crew to my apartment at the Peninsula, a heavy-duty one. Tell them to throw out the rug, all of them, and buy new ones. Something warm." He hung up and stood, looking out at the city that was just beginning to wake up. He was the king of this city, and he had just discovered the entire kingdom was built on sand. He had to tell her. He had to go back to the hospital and face the woman whose life he had single-handedly destroyed. Arthur arrived back at St. Jude's as the first weak, grey light of dawn filtered into the hospital hallway. He'd showered and changed, but he felt dirtier than he had in the rain. He was wearing a simple dark sweater and trousers, not a suit. The armour was gone. He found Eleanor asleep in the uncomfortable guest chair by Lily's bed. The little girl was sleeping peacefully, her colour better, the terrifying blue tinge gone from her lips. The monitors beeped in a steady, reassuring rhythm. For a few seconds, Arthur just watched them. He saw a family, a broken, shattered family, but one that was his. He gently touched Elena's shoulder. She started, her eyes flying open, and the first expression on her face was fear. It broke his heart. "Elena, can we talk in the hall?" She looked at Lily, then at him, and nodded. She quietly followed him out into the corridor, folding her arms, the borrowed robe still clutched around her. "She's doing better," Elena said, her voice rough from exhaustion. "Dr. Chen said the surgery is scheduled for tomorrow. They're testing your blood now." "Good," he said. He couldn't meet her eyes. He stared at the polished floor. "Elena, I was up all night. I went back into the old Nexus Core servers." She stiffened. "Why? To find more proof of what a terrible person I was?" "No," he said, finally looking up. His eyes, the same as their daughter's, were filled with a pain that mirrored her own. To find the truth. And he told her. He told her everything. He told her about Julian's IP address. He told her about the offshore account, the frame-up, the spoofed emails. He told her about the Project Horizon file, and his realization that it was her medical research, not a business plan. "He used your family trust account in the Caymans. He knew I'd see the name and assume the worst. He planned it all. He was siphoning money, and he needed me to believe you were in on it so I'd turn on you." Elena listened, her face unreadable. She didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She just stood there, absorbing the truth of the last 7 years. You thought I was sleeping with him," she finally whispered. "It's what he wanted me to think," Arthur said, his voice cracking. I was so arrogant, so insecure. I couldn't believe you'd choose Mu if you had another option. When I saw the emails, it confirmed every fear I ever had about myself. It was easier to believe you were a monster than to believe I was a fool." Elena leaned against the wall. "So, all this time," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "All this time, My poverty, the shelters, Lily being sick and me not being able to, all of it. It was all because Julian Thorne sent an email, and you believed him. Yes, Arthur said. The word was a surrender. I tried to tell you, she whispered, a tear finally tracing a path down her cheek. That night, I kept saying, it's not what it looks like. You wouldn't listen. You just yelled. I know. He took a step toward her, but stopped. He had no right to comfort her. Elena, I'm... The word sorry felt like a joke. It was a pebble trying to fill the Grand Canyon. Sorry doesn't fix it, he said, reading her mind. It doesn't give you back those 7 years. It doesn't give Lily a normal childhood. It doesn't fix her heart. No, she agreed. It doesn't. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a keycard. This is for the penthouse. Stay there, you and Lily. When she's out of the hospital, she's not going back to a shelter. Ever. Elena looked at the keycard as if it were a scorpion. I don't want your money, Arthur. I never did. That's what you still don't understand. This isn't for you, he said, his voice raw. It's for her. It's the bare minimum. A safe, warm place to live. That's all. Please don't punish her because of me. She hesitated, then slowly took the key. What about him? She asked. Julian. I've already frozen his assets, Arthur said, his jaw tightening. His life, as he knows it, is over. But that's not enough. What he did, it wasn't just corporate fraud. It was destroying a family. He tried to destroy my family, and you succeeded where he failed, Elena said, the words a final, devastating twist of the knife. She was right. Julian had loaded the gun, but Arthur had been the one to pull the trigger. I'm going to fix this, Elena, he said. I'm going to ruin him. And then, I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to fix this. A nurse came around the corner, smiling. Mr. Vance, your blood work came back. You're a perfect match. You're clear to be her primary donor for the surgery tomorrow. Arthur closed his eyes. It was the first piece of good news he'd had. He could, at the very least, give his daughter his blood. It was a start. He looked at Elena, who was staring at him, her expression lost in a storm of grief, relief, and 7 years of unresolved anger. The silence was broken by his phone ringing. It was a sharp, demanding buzz. He looked at the screen. It was Clarissa DeWitt, his fiancée. In the chaos, he had completely forgotten she existed. He hit ignore, silencing the call, and put the phone in his pocket. One fire at a time. And the woman in front of him, the woman he had wronged more than any other, was the only one that mattered. The surgery was scheduled for 8 a.m. Arthur spent the morning in a different wing of the hospital, giving blood. He sat in the chair, watching the dark, AB negative blood fill the bags, feeling a strange sense of purpose. He was, quite literally, giving a part of himself back to the daughter he'd never known. When he was done, he went to the surgical waiting room. Elena was already there, curled in a chair, staring at a blank television screen. She hadn't moved in hours. They just took her back, she said, without looking at him. He sat down, leaving a respectful 2 chairs between them. The silence was heavy, broken only by the clock on the wall. An hour passed, then 2. You should get some coffee, he said. I'm fine. Elena, you need to eat. You need to rest. I'll stay. I'll have Marcus take you to the hotel, just for an hour. I'm not leaving, she said. I'm not asking you to leave. I'm just... He sighed, running his hands through his hair. He was failing at this too. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to help. You want to help, she said, finally turning to him. Help me understand. Why him? Why is Julian Thorne still working for you? After all this, you found out and he's... What? Still at his desk? No, Arthur said, his voice hardening. He's not at his desk. I told you, I froze his assets. He's a rat in a trap. He just doesn't know it yet. I was waiting until Lily was safe. She's not safe until he's gone, Arthur. A man like that, he won't just walk away. She was right. He looked at the clock. 11 a.m. The surgery would be hours. You're right, he said, standing up. I've been a coward for 7 years. I can stop for one afternoon. He walked out of the waiting room. He called Ben. Where is he? His office. He's been on the phone with the bank for the last 2 hours, screaming. He knows something's wrong. Good, Arthur said. Keep him there. He took the elevator down, got into his car, and drove himself to the Vanstech Tower. He hadn't driven himself in years. The feel of the wheel in his hands was grounding. He bypassed the lobby, taking his private elevator straight to the executive floor. His secretary looked up, stunned. Mr. Vance, we didn't. You're not on the schedule. Is Julian Thorne in his office? Yes, sir, but he's... Arthur walked past her and kicked open the door to Julian's office. Julian was standing by his window, his face purple with rage, his phone clutched in his hand. He was a handsome man, with slicked back hair and a suit that was trying too hard. Arthur, thank God. Someone's locked me out of everything. The bank, my trading accounts, it's a corporate hack. It has to be. It wasn't a hack, Julian, Arthur said, closing the door behind him. Julian's bluster faded, replaced by a cold, sudden understanding. Arthur, what is this? I was up all night, Arthur said, walking calmly to Julian's desk. I was feeling nostalgic. I took a look at the old Nexus core servers. Do you remember those? Julian's face went pale. It's amazing what you can find in the root logs, Arthur continued, his voice conversational. IP addresses, spoofed email headers, deleted files, like a file called Project Horizon. I always thought that was your plan to steal the company. Imagine my surprise when I found out it was a medical file, research on a heart defect. Arthur, I don't know what you're talking about. You framed her, Arthur said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. You used her family's medical trust to make it look like she was embezzling. You planted the emails. You lied to my face. You let me destroy her. You let me throw her out. Julian swallowed, his bravado gone. You were going to lose the company anyway. You were too soft. You were spending all your time with her. I did what I had to do to protect the asset. I did it for us. You did it for you, Arthur corrected. And you've been doing it ever since. The Singapore subsidiary, the Shell Corporation. You've stolen millions from me, Julian, for 7 years. She was holding you back, Julian spat, desperation making him ugly. I saved you. I made you who you are. You owe me. Arthur laughed. It was a cold, terrible sound. You're right. You did make me who I am. You made me a monster. And you're about to see what that monster does. He walked closer until he was just inches from Julian. You didn't just steal my money. You didn't just frame my partner. You stole my daughter. Daughter? What daughter? You don't have a... Julian's eyes went wide. Oh my God. She was pregnant. Yes, Arthur said. Her name is Lily. She's 6, and she's currently in surgery, fighting for her life, because of a genetic heart condition, the same one Elena was researching in the file you used to frame her. And for the last 7 years, while you've been buying boats in Miami, my daughter has been living in and out of homeless shelters. The reality of his actions finally hit Julian. He wasn't just facing fraud charges. He was facing the wrath of a man he had wronged in a way that money could never fix. "Arthur, please," Julian whimpered, backing away. "It was business. It was just business." "When you told me she betrayed me," Arthur said, "I destroyed her life. Imagine what I'm going to do to you." Arthur turned and walked to the door. "Ben," he said into his phone. "He's ready." The door opened, and 2 security guards, along with 2 uniformed Seattle police officers, entered the office. "Julian Thorne," one of the officers said, "you're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy." As they pulled Julian's arms behind his back, he looked at Arthur, his face a mask of disbelief. "You can't do this. I'll tell them everything. I'll tell them about your deals, the shortcuts you took." "You do that, Julian," Arthur said from the doorway. "You'll be in a minimum security prison for fraud. I'll be in a slightly more comfortable one for market manipulation. But I'll be out in 5 years. You, on the other hand, you let a child, my child, sleep in the rain. I will use every dollar I have to make sure every inmate in that prison knows exactly what you did. It's not business, Julian. It's personal." Arthur turned and walked away, not looking back as Julian Thorne was led away in handcuffs, his life in ruins. When Arthur returned to the hospital, the waiting room was different. Clarissa DeWitt was there. She stood as he walked in, her arms crossed, her face a mask of cold fury. She was impeccably dressed, as always, in a sharp Chanel suit. "Arthur," she snapped, "I have been calling you for 24 hours. Your driver said family emergency. Your office said you were unavailable. The gala was a disaster. What is so important that you—" She stopped as she saw Eleanor, who was standing by the window, looking pale and exhausted in Arthur's robe. Clarissa's eyes raked over Eleanor, taking in the cheap, worn-out shoes, the tangled hair. "My God, Arthur," she said with a look of pure disgust. "What is this? Are you back with her, the thief?" "Clarissa," Arthur said, his voice flat and dead. "You need to leave." "Leave? I am your fiancé. We have a contract. Our families—" "The contract is broken," Arthur said. "The engagement is off. Don't call me again. My lawyers will be in touch with your father's lawyers to dissolve the prenup." You're throwing me away? For her?" Clarissa shrieked, pointing at Eleanor. "I'm not throwing you away," Arthur said, walking past her to stand near Eleanor. "I'm letting you go. You and I. This was never real. Go find someone who can give you what you want, Clarissa." "I can't." Clarissa looked from Arthur's resolute face to Elena's tired one. She saw a connection there, a history she could never compete with. With a final, sputtering sound of indignation, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the waiting room, her heels clicking angrily on the tile. The door swished shut, leaving Arthur and Elena alone in the silence. "So that's it?" Elena said quietly. "You just end it, like a business deal." "It was a business deal," Arthur said. "That's all it ever was." He looked at her. "He's gone, Elena. Julian. He's been arrested. It's over." Elena nodded, absorbing the news, but she didn't look relieved. She just looked empty. Before either of them could say another word, the doors to the surgical wing opened, and Dr. Chen came out, pulling off his surgical mask. He was smiling. "It was a complete success," he said. Elena's knees buckled. Arthur caught her, his hands on her arms, holding her up. She's okay?" Elena sobbed, the tears finally coming. "She's okay," Dr. Chen confirmed. "The repair is textbook. The blood you donated, Mr. Vance, was critical. She's in recovery now. She's a fighter. You'll be able to see her in about an hour." Eleanor was crying into her hands, a torrent of 7 years of fear and anxiety pouring out of her. Arthur, acting on an instinct he thought was long dead, put his arms around her. He didn't pull her close, but he held her, offering his strength as she wept. She didn't pull away. "Thank you," she whispered to the doctor. "Thank you." An hour later, they were standing over a small bed in the PCICU. Lily was small, pale, and hooked up to a dozen machines, but she was breathing on her own. Her chest, under her hospital gown, rose and fell with a new, stronger rhythm. Elena was holding her hand, stroking her hair. Arthur stood at the foot of the bed, his hands in his pockets, feeling like an intruder. She has your eyes," Elena said quietly, not looking at him. "I know," he said. "She's stubborn, too, like you, and she's smart. She can do basic coding. I taught her." A small, sad smile touched Arthur's lips. "Of course she can." He cleared his throat. "Elena, I know this doesn't fix anything. I know sorry is a meaningless word. But I am so sorry. For all of it." She finally looked up at him. The hatred was gone. The fear was gone. She just looked tired. "I know, Arthur. I want to be her father," he said, his voice thick. "If you'll let me. I don't deserve it. I know that. But she deserves a father. And I will spend every day for the rest of my life earning the right to be in this room." Elena looked at her daughter, then back at the man who had been the love of her life and her greatest enemy. She saw the billionaire, but she also saw the man who had sat in a garage with her, dreaming of the future. He was broken, just as she was. But he was here. "She's going to need a lot of care," Elena said softly. "After this. She can't go back to how it was." "She won't," Arthur said, his voice iron. "I bought the house, our old house, the one on Queen Anne Hill, the one we used to walk by, dreaming." Elena's eyes widened. "The blue one? With the wraparound porch?" "I bought it this morning. It's being furnished. It's yours. It's hers. I'll stay at the penthouse. But I'll come by. If that's okay, I'll bring dinner." Elena nodded, a single, slow nod. That would be okay. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a reunion. It was a truce. It was the first, fragile step on a long, long road. Lily's eyelids fluttered. She squinted, her blue eyes, their blue eyes trying to focus. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice tiny. "I'm right here, baby," Elena cried, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "I'm right here." Lily's gaze shifted, moving past her mother to the tall man standing at the end of the bed. She was groggy from the anesthesia, but she recognized him. He was the man from the rain. The man who had a car like a spaceship. "Who?" she whispered. Elena looked at Arthur, and he saw a flicker of the old warmth. She was giving him a gift. Arthur walked to the side of the bed, his heart hammering harder than it had during any boardroom takedown. He tentatively reached out and touched his daughter's small hand. "My name is Arthur," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm your dad." Lily's eyes widened. She looked at her mum, who nodded, smiling through her tears. Lily looked back at Arthur, and her small, chapped lips curved into a weak, sleepy smile. "Hi, Dad," she whispered, and her fingers curled, just slightly, around his. Arthur Vance, the millionaire, the titan, the ruthless shark of Seattle broke down. He lowered his head, his shoulders shaking, and for the first time in 7 years, he cried. He wasn't crying for what he'd lost. He was crying for what, against all odds, he had just been given a second chance to find. We often believe that our lives are defined by our biggest successes, the money we make, the titles we earn, the empires we build. We build walls of glass and steel to protect ourselves, only to find out we've built a prison. Arthur Vance had it all, but it took a cold night, a blinding rain, and the face of a child he never knew to realize he had nothing. His greatest mistake wasn't losing his company, it was losing his faith in the person he loved. But the most powerful stories aren't about the fall, they're about the redemption. It's never too late to stop the car. It's never too late to look into the rain and face the ghosts you created. Arthur's real journey didn't start in a boardroom. It started in a hospital hallway with a single, difficult, and honest apology. What did you think of Arthur's story? Do you believe he truly deserves a second chance? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life drama that will make you think. We'll see you in the next video.